All right, so here we are. So in our today's video, we are going to be discussing something that is so important to understand. And this comes down to the understanding of black magic and some of the deeper realities behind it that most people do not understand when it is that they are starting to get into these practices. So there are a host of different things that can actually take place, and that most often do take place for someone who is getting themselves into black magic. I have seen it happen in my own process. I have seen it happen in countless other people. And a lot of the times, this stuff is happening unconsciously, meaning you're not aware of what's actually happening and you're not aware of what you're doing. So I'm going to be explaining one of the most common patterns that takes place in modern times, black magic, for people that are starting to approach the practice. And this is something that is absolutely worth knowing a lot more about, because this is important stuff to really be able to understand, especially if you're someone who's starting to practice with occultism and you're working with different types of energies, all the way from some of the darker energies to whatever other types of energies there are. There's a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to black magic, and this is what I'm going to be explaining in this today's video, specifically when it comes to this path that people will unconsciously walk down, and some of the unfortunate things that then have to manifest because of the person not being aware of what it is that they're actually doing and what it is that they're getting themselves into. So once again, if this is a video that interests you, then I would highly recommend that you stay tuned, and I will see you on the other side. All right, so here we go. So once again, I'm talking about one of the main primary patterns that I have personally seen, and this is even from my own experience getting into this type of stuff, that I see happen to so many people, especially now more so than ever, because there seems to be a lot more people that are being drawn into the occult, specifically some of the darker aspects of occultism, and are approaching it in a way that truly is not grounded and truly isn't healthy. But a lot of people don't understand what the actual underneath mechanics and the trauma response is behind why they approach it in this way. So first thing that we want to start with is we want to understand what black magic actually is. Black magic has gotten a huge negative connotation in modern time society, largely, I believe, because of the entertainment industry and also a lot of religious programming. In essence, black magic is working with spirituality that delves very deep into the unconscious and the subconscious mind of the practitioner who is working with that spirituality. So it is not inherently a bad or an evil thing, but it is something that is absolutely going to require a sense of commitment to self, a sense of groundedness, and a general education to know what you're getting yourself into for when you start delving into these darker parts of yourself and working through repressed energies like unhealed trauma. Now, this is something that I see, once again, most common that happens for people that are getting into black magic and they don't really know what it is that they're doing. One of the most common things that I see is someone gets into black magic with the wrong foundation. They get into it from a space of wanting to have more control in their life. And oftentimes, this is largely going to be driven by a trauma response. So the types of people that oftentimes get pulled into black magic are people that have been through some serious, severe types of trauma, and oftentimes psychic trauma. So this could be a lot of spiritual trauma or religious types of trauma, energetic trauma that is not so easy to necessarily pinpoint. So a lot of people that are drawn to black magic in the first place are already approaching it from a severely damaged space. Now, is that a problem inherently? Absolutely not. It's very understandable. If black magic is a form of spirituality to heal deep wounds within the system, it makes sense that people would be drawn to it. But where it does become a problem is when people don't understand this is the reason why they're drawn to black magic in the first place. And then they start to get into it and they're approaching it from a place of actually trying to have more control unconsciously. So in other words, you might have been through certain types of abuse with someone in your family. Now you're drawn towards black magic because you want to be able to use black magic to protect yourself from that abuse. So you are approaching the practice from a lens of wanting to figure out how to control a trauma that you've actually been through in the past by making sure it never happens to you again. And I know up front that can sound okay, but in reality, that's not necessarily addressing the root cause. It's just putting a band-aid on the problem. Now, the thing is with black magic, you can actually learn how to do these things. You can use psychic energies to target a specific person and have a negative impact on that person's life. But what you don't understand is that that person is also a reflection of you. So what you're doing to them is also what you're doing to yourself. And it's only a matter of time until the energy comes full circle. So once again, when we're looking at black magic, so many people are approaching it to actually get more control over their life and over their sense of self-identity. Now, the sense of self-identity most of the times is going to be identified with an inauthentic sense of self because it is a trauma response. So people that are getting into the practice are trying to build on a false sense of self-identity, and they don't even understand this is what they're truly doing because this is more so operating within that unconscious space. This is so important to know because I have seen this pattern happen for so many people, myself included. I have gotten into black magic from a space of wanting to control my reality more and basically right the wrongs of some of the traumas that I've been through in my past so that it would never happen again. And this is not a healthy approach. And I am letting you know this 110% sure. So this is what will take place. And this is something that you literally, if you're someone who observes this stuff, you will see it happen. People will get into black magic and it will actually fuel the false sense of self. And the reason why it is fueling the false sense of self is for a couple reasons. When you're getting into real black magic, these practices are going to stimulate repressed negative energies that are related to trauma. It's going to stimulate these things to actually come up to the surface to then be worked with and to be processed. When someone doesn't understand this or know this causes different protective mechanisms within the person's psyche to be overactive, which basically means when the sensitivity or the vulnerabilities start to surface, the protective parts of self that are oftentimes attachments to our false sense of identity, they become even more active as a form of trying to protect the system. So our protective parts get a lot more activated because they're feeling the emotions in the system that they are thinking they need to avoid or escape from. So the way that this then manifests into the practitioner is it actually inflates their false ego or their false identity. So this is why you're going to see so many people get into black magic and they're going to start kind of going on this egotistical rampage or this trip where they think they are something that they're not, or they think they are more powerful than what they actually are, or they think everything is about gaining more power. And all that is it is a response of real black magic surfacing repressed sensitivities within the nervous system that the person is truly afraid to surrender to and afraid to be with. So rather, it is causing the ego or the identity to be inflated so that this person can have a sense of control and have a sense of, once again, escaping what is actually getting triggered. But remember, this is all unconscious to the practitioner. It's all unconscious to the person. They don't know that this is what's happening. They really think that they're becoming more powerful, or they think that they're becoming this version of themselves that they've always wanted to be. But in reality, that's not the case. So you're going to find this hyperinflation of the identity of the ego, the false self that is going to emerge. That is going to play out for a period of time. So at this point, what's happening within the practitioner is they are actually running away from the deeper repressed energies that are in their nervous system. So when it comes to the fear, the anger, the abandonment, the betrayals, all of these other emotions, the sadness, these are the things that are actually needing to be worked with and are needing to be processed when you're working with black magic, because that's what we're actually tapping into. We're tapping into the ability to bring these things up so that we can heal them at a deeper level. We're facing aspects of our shadow self in our unconscious mind that previously maybe we didn't have access to until we started using black magic or psychic means to stimulate that process. It's the same way that meditation can get us into a more relaxed state as we practice it. When we're using black magic, it can stimulate repressed energies in the system to come to the surface so that they have to be faced. So the person that gets this ego inflation, this false self-inflation, they are actively running away from everything in the unconscious, yet at the same time, they are also initiating more of the surfacing within the unconscious. And all of this is happening beknownst to the person's awareness. So this is like a weird dynamic. It's almost like a dynamic of putting the foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. But what you'll notice is that the person, as they're inflating this false self, they are also going to be doing more rituals, more invocations, and more energetic practices that are also going to stimulate more of the true repressed energies that are actually under the surface. So the identity is an identity that feels in control. It feels powerful. It feels like nothing can stop the person. But really underneath the nervous system of this person that is experiencing this, there are very vulnerable and sensitive parts of themselves that are very afraid, that are very insecure, that do not feel powerful, but feel very weak and are probably very sad and frustrated. And that's going to be related to parts of the wounded inner child. But the false self is the complete opposite of that. It is going to make the person feel like they're on top of the world for a period of time. And they're going to keep doing rituals and invocations, and it's going to be stimulating all of these repressed energies to come even more to the surface, which inherently means they're going to have to resist even more and more and more to stay afloat with the false self. So this is why you see such significant ego, false self inflation take place for people that are in the occult community working with black magic. They are hyperinflating the false self because they are having to run away from more and more and more what it is that they are actually initiating and stimulating within their nervous system at a trauma level. And see, this is where the make or break happens. This happens to so many. I have seen it happen to so many people. I've literally experienced it myself. What eventually happens is you get to a point where you can no longer run. Your false self becomes so inflated that it pops. And this is like one of the most significant ego deaths that you will experience and that someone will go through. And that ego death is no joke, because it takes the person from thinking they are this way of being, and then it completely destroys that. It just dissolves that. And this can happen very quickly. And then everything that they initiated in regards to the repressed traumas and the repressed emotions in the nervous system then comes flooding up to the surface. So not only is the false self breaking now and dissolving, but now everything that was stimulated now comes flooding in like the flood of Noah's Ark. All right. And this is an intense experience to go through if you are not educated on what you're getting yourself into and you don't know what's happening. This is literally where people end up in the psych ward. This is where people end up offing themselves. This is where people either make it or break it. So obviously the person who is educated or who has a connection to the core is going to go through this process and recalibrate. There is going to be a massive learning lesson in all of this for the person who is truly committed to themselves in this process and is in alignment with healthy intentions. Healthy intentions in the sense of wanting to heal through trauma, wanting to be in alignment with who you actually are, being more authentic, wanting to live your purpose on this planet to have an influence, a healthy influence. These are healthy intentions to have that will make it a lot more likely for someone who experiences this process to be able to recalibrate and then continue walking down the path from a more healthy space as they heal through that huge ego death and then face those repressed wounds. All right. So I have seen it happen so many times. People get into black magic. It is a trauma response. They're trying to control the trauma that's in their body by now using this form of spirituality, which is a pretty intense form of spiritual bypassing. Then as they start to actually notice manifestations or results from what it is that they're doing, it starts to feed or fuel the false self, because now not only are they spiritually bypassing and are they able to get a sense of control over the trauma in the past and what's currently in their body, but now they are starting to create new realities or new mindsets and belief systems that make them think that this way of being is going to continue growing. So they start thinking that, okay, I'm going to be this person. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do it in this way. I'm going to interact with this. I'm going to create this. And it starts building. And this is where the inflation of the false self-identity really takes place. And that can go on for a while. This can go on for several months, up to potentially a year to maybe even longer. For me, this lasted for roughly, I would say more so about a year-ish, maybe a little bit longer actually. And this inflation will absolutely take place to the point where the person is not, and this is the interesting part, they're not actually living the life they truly want to live either. Like if the person that's in this process is not actually satisfied, it's a continuous addiction of having to be in more control and having to do things that you think are going to make you feel better. And it literally becomes a form of unhealthy addiction to inflate this false self. But the person is getting this dopamine hit of feeling like they're in control. And that's why people will really do this, because the trauma in their system is so deep rooted that just that sense of feeling like they're in control of their reality and they know how to manage it in that way, that makes them feel good enough, satisfied enough to continue building on that. And the whole essence of it, the unconscious driver is, I want more and more and more control. Until I control everything and until I'm completely the person that I've always thought I was and that I want to be, and until my life is the way that I want to experience it. But the problem is that you will never get there. And every single person that I've experienced go through this phase, myself included, you never get to where you actually want to be, because you are fighting against your unconscious and your subconscious mind, because that's where your trauma is. That's where the vulnerabilities are. That's where those wounded parts of the inner child are. And until you face those, and build relationships with those parts and surrender to that emotional processing and then build a healthier foundation for yourself, you are not going to live the life that you want. And you're not going to be able to live in more of a harmonious way either. You're always going to be fighting against the stream or the resistance of your shadow. So the person's going to get that hyperinflation of the false self until there comes a threshold where there's no more room for the false self to grow. And this can be from a multitude of different reasons. This can be very cyclical for the individual in the sense of like how this happens. This can be astrological. This can be, I would say that this can largely be astrological, and it can be cyclical for when a person reaches that point where that inflated self can no longer grow. And then almost everything they start experiencing is a result of the shadow. So remember, as the inflation of the false self grows, the shadow that's trying to control everything, or the shadow that's underneath everything, is actually getting more stimulated because the person is also using black magic. They're still doing rituals. They're still doing invocations of these darker energies that are stimulating the shadow. So it gets to that point of hyperinflation where the person thinks they know what they're doing. They think they know why they're doing it. And then the shadow comes in, and it comes into a certain point where there's no more running from it. So that's when the person is attached to that false self. And then next thing you know, the resistance gets so significant that there's nothing left to do other than letting go of that identity. And it becomes so clear to the person's psyche that they either have to let it go or they're going to risk literally losing their mind. It's kind of like the way that I experienced it was like, I could recognize when this was happening for me, and I could literally tell that I was attaching to something inside of my psyche. And if I didn't allow it to let go, I was going to start dealing with a lot of crazy, unhealthy thought patterns. And the more I was trying to hold on to it, the more my mind was like playing tricks on me. It's not that it was playing tricks on me, but it felt like that. It was saying things to me that I've never experienced before. And then as soon as I said, you know what, I'm just going to let go. I'm going to surrender this. I'm not going to attach to this. Though everything in my mind cleared, it just released. And it was more of like a blank slate. And that's when I realized, I was like, wow, this is no joke. And I can see why some people that are not educated and are not getting into black magic spirituality with the right intentions can end up really harming themselves and can end up really re-traumatizing themselves and end up in psych wards or in even worse positions where they don't want to live anymore. Okay. So that happens. The false self breaks. The shadow comes flooding in with all the repressed energies and emotions that were in the system from the trauma. Now the person goes through the process of becoming their authentic self for the first time, probably in many years. Now that the shadow's there, they have to surrender to it. They have to go into that heaviness, and this can last quite a long time. This can literally, once again, be a year to a little bit over a year of surrendering to this process and really building a relationship to the totality of what's going on within your nervous system and what's going on with your traumas. And this is where the person gets to ground more in being honest, surrendering this need to have more power, surrendering the need to always be in control, but just to let go and be who they actually are and just be with themselves in general, and learn to trust the process as things move, learning to listen to the intuition as well as listening to the instincts. This is when that person experiences this. And it takes time. And through that, they're also going to be building a healthier foundation that will support them in processing these shadows or in processing these repressed energies. And if you don't have a guide or you don't have support like a mentor through this process to really understand how to implement it or how to go through it, that can be really tough for you. It can take a lot of time for you to actually grasp what is truly taking place. And the more stubborn someone is, the longer it's going to take and the more pain they're going to experience through that process. Why do I know that? Because I've been stubborn as hell through my process, and it has put me through excruciating amounts of pain that I don't feel like I necessarily had to go through looking back. But obviously I can understand why I did go through it so that I can be a better guide or be a better teacher for those of you that may be experiencing the same thing. So once again, this is the phase where it either makes you or it breaks you. All right. The person with the inflated false self, they are going to be projecting all of their repressed energies outwards, trying to create an image of themselves or an idea of themselves that is not actually who they are. And at their deepest core, they're going to know this too, but they are so afraid to finally let go of control and go into those repressed energies within self. Okay. But when that identity crashes, because it will crack, just like an eggshell, it will crack and you will be forced to see the yolk. This is where you get to see, is this person going to make it or are they going to not make it? And when I say not make it, I mean like, are they going to stay in resistance and then just end up living in this re-traumatizing cycle on and on and on, the more they choose to hold on to that? And people do that. Some people are so resistant to their process that they will rather hold on to this identity, this false self, and go through the pain that comes with it, because at least that is something they can control. Even though it's not fun and it doesn't feel good, they can at least control the pain they're going through and have this familiarity of what's taking place. So they will stay there. And that just causes a person's life to spiral downwards. So it's not recommended and it's not ideal, but I would say the majority of people do not honor the process, and it's unfortunate. And people will spiral and they will get stuck in these toxic trauma cycles and these loops, and they will stay in that, and then they'll attract other people that reiterate that back. That's why there's so much toxic energy in the occult community in general. Just take a look at TikTok or take a look at modern left-hand path, black magic occultism, and you're going to see a group of so many toxic people that have so much repressed trauma that are all trying to find a way to control it using their spiritual practices. I'm going to curse your family because you pissed me off. I'm going to put a death curse on you because I'm afraid to die to my own ego. Right? Like, I'm going to do a love spell on this person because I know how to work with the dark magic. And I'm not concerned about actually learning how to attract someone that's meant for me organically. I would rather try to control their mind so that I can get them to love me because I don't think I'm worthy of love in the first place. I'm going to try to manifest more money using black magic and demons because I've been struggling with money my whole life, and I feel like this demon is going to be able to do it for me. It's going to bring the money to me, even though there's other reasons why I'm not in resonance for financial freedom that are important to work with. You know, rather than just doing a spell or a ritual for some quick money, it's like, why not work on the resonance within your nervous system so you can be in resonance for money to come to you, rather than being in a codependent relationship with a spirit or with an entity or whatever. So this is what it is that I wanted to say. You know, this is a process that a lot of people will find themselves in that are getting into black magic. And it all starts with trauma. It all starts with getting into black magic itself as a trauma response, which I'm not saying it's not something for you. There's reasons why you went through what you went through. And there are reasons why you're attracted to black magic itself if you're someone that's into that, but you have to also look at it from a practical lens of why you're also probably drawn to it. It's probably also a trauma response that you're trying to use to better control your reality and control your sense of self from not having to feel what you actually went through in your past. And then if your intentions is to just make more money or just become this more powerful person or to attract more sexual partners in your life, that's not the best intentions to lead with in regards to your practices. Because when it gets to that point where your ego gets inflated and you think you're this person that you're actually not, and then that comes crumbling down, now you're going to be faced with what's actually important. That's why you want to have education and a foundation getting into this stuff so that you know what you're working with and so that it does not have to hurt you. Because a lot of people can cause a lot of pain and suffering for themselves if they don't know what they're getting themselves into. All right, with that being said, I've got some food I'm cooking. I'm going to wrap this up here. If you got value, slam the thumbs up, drop down into the comment section and let me know what you learned from this. Subscribe to my YouTube channel that connects you to everything I'm doing. Hit the notification bell, get notified whenever I post, and copy and paste this link and send it to someone that you feel like might need to hear this. Okay. Now also check out my Patreon. I've got tons of exclusive content over there, including an entire magic training course, which I highly recommend you take a look at. Okay, it's really valuable. There's over 1,500 plus members actively signed up. And then there is a ritualistic service that is being performed this month on the 29th. It's an energetic transfer from me to you as the receiving participant to support you through the processing of working with these deeper layers of your unconscious mind and integrating the shadow. Okay, if you want to take advantage of any of this, now is the time. First link below. Then the second link's where you can book calls with me. You can also book a tarot card reading with Alexia. She's very gifted. And then we have the rest of the links below. All right. With that being said, we're going to wrap it up here. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day or nights, wherever you are. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.